Hey everyone, welcome to Real Talk, Grimm Edition. I'm your host, Josh, and this is the place where I dive into the dark, whimsical world of the Brothers Grimm. Whether you're a longtime fan of fairy tales or just discovering them, you're in the right spot. Each episode, I'll read a classic Grimm's fairy tale and explore its deeper meanings, lessons, and how it's influenced everything from modern storytelling to pop culture. From well-known stories like Cinderella to the more obscure ones that still carry a punch. We're going to get into what makes these tales so timeless and sometimes downright eerie. But this isn't just about reading stories, it's about peeling back the layers and looking at what these stories really teach us. The Grimm brothers didn't shy away from showing the darker side of life. And in many ways, those darker elements hold some of the most powerful messages, whether it's about good versus evil, human nature, or the consequences of choices. So whether you're here for the ride of a familiar story or to uncover something you haven't heard before, stick with me as we explore the fascinating and sometimes twisted world of Grimm's fairy tales. So we're going to jump right in. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing the Little Peasant. So grab your favorite drink, maybe some hot chocolate, sit back, and enjoy the tale. The Little Peasant. There was a certain village wherein no one lived but really rich peasants, and just one poor one, whom they called the Little Peasant. He had not even so much as a cow, and still less money to buy one, and yet he and his wife did so wish to have one. One day he said to her, "Hark you, I have a good thought. There is our gossip the carpenter. He shall make us a wooden calf and paint it brown so that it looks like any other, and in time it will certainly get big and be a cow." The woman also liked the idea, and their gossip the carpenter cut and planed the calf and painted it as it ought to be, and made it with its head hanging down as if it were eating. Next morning, when the cows were being driven out, the little peasant called the cowherd in and said, "Look, I have a little calf there, but it is still small and has still to be carried." The cowherd asked, "All right," and took it in his arms and carried it to the pasture and set it among the grass. The little calf always remained standing like one which was eating, and the cowherd said, "It will soon run alone, just look how it eats already." At night, when he was going to drive the herd home again, he said to the calf, "If thou canst stand there and eat thy fill, thou canst also go on thy 4 legs. I don't care to drag thee home again in my arms." But the little peasant stood at his door and waited for his little calf. And when the cowherd drove the cows through the village and the calf was missing, he inquired where it was. The cowherd answered, "It is still standing out there eating. It would not stop and come with us." But the little peasant said, "Oh, but I must have my beast back again." Then they went back to the meadow together, but someone had stolen the calf and it was gone. The cowherd said it must have run away. The peasant, however, said, "Don't tell me that," and led the cowherd before the mayor, who for his carelessness condemned him to give the peasant a cow for the calf which had run away. And now the little peasant and his wife had the cow for which they had so long wished, and they were heartily glad. But they had no food for it, and could give it nothing to eat. So it soon had to be killed. They salted the flesh, and the peasant went into the town and wanted to sell the skin there, so that he might buy a new calf with the proceeds. On the way he passed by a mill, and there sat a raven with broken wings. And out of pity he took on him and wrapped him in the skin. As however the weather grew so bad and there was a storm of rain and wind, he could go no farther, and turned back to the mill and begged for shelter. The miller's wife was alone in the house, and said to the peasant, "Lay thyself on the straw there," and gave him a slice of bread with cheese on it. The peasant ate it and lay down with his skin beside him, and the woman thought, "He is tired and has gone to sleep." In the meantime came the parson. The miller's wife received him well and said, "My husband is out, so we will have a feast." The peasant listened, and when he heard about feasting, he was vexed that he had been forced to make shift with a slice of bread with cheese on it. Then the woman served up 4 different things: roast meat, salad, cakes, and wine. Just as they were about to sit down and eat, there was a knocking outside. The woman said, "Oh heavens, it is my husband." She quickly hid the roast meat inside the tiled stove, the wine under the pillow, the salad on the bed, and the cakes under it, and the parson in the cupboard in the entrance. Then she opened the door for her husband and said, "Thank heaven thou art back again. There is such a storm, it looks as if the world were coming to an end." The miller saw the peasant lying in the straw and asked, "What is that fellow doing there?" "Ah," said the wife, "the poor knave came in from the storm in the rain and begged for shelter. So I gave him a bit of bread and cheese and showed him where the straw was." The man said, "I have no objection, but be quick and get me something to eat." The woman said, "But I have nothing but bread and cheese." "I am contented with anything," replied the husband. "So far as I am concerned, bread and cheese will do," and looked at the peasant and said, "Come and eat some more with me." The peasant did not require to be invited twice, but got up and ate. After the miller saw the skin in which the raven was, lying on the ground, and asked, "What hast thou there?" The peasant answered, "I have a soothsayer inside it." "Can he foretell anything to me?" said the miller. "Why not?" answered the peasant. "But he only says 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself." The miller was curious and said, "Let him foretell something for once." Then the peasant pinched the raven's head so that he croaked and made a noise like "Kurr, kurr." The miller said, "What did he say?" The peasant answered, "In the first place, he say that there is some wine hidden under the pillow." "Bless me!" cried the miller, and went there and found the wine. "Now go on," said he. The peasant made the raven croak again and said, "In the second place, he says that there is some roast meat in the tiled stove." "Upon my word!" cried the miller, and went there, and found the roast meat. The peasant made the raven prophesy still more, and said, "Thirdly, he says that there is some salad on the bed." "That would be a fine thing," cried the miller, and went there and found the salad. At last the peasant pinched the raven once more till he croaked and said, "Fourthly, he says that there are some cakes under the bed." "That would be a fine thing," cried the miller, and he looked there and found the cakes. And now the 2 sat down to the table together, but the miller's wife was frightened to death, and went to bed and took all the keys with her. The miller would have liked so much to know the 5th, but the little peasant said, "First we will quickly eat the 4 things, for the 5th is something bad." So they ate, and after that they bargained how much the miller to give for the 5th prophecy, until they agreed on 300 thalers. Then the peasant once more pinched the raven's head till he croaked loudly. The miller asked, "What did he say?" The peasant replied, "He says that the devil is hiding outside there in the cupboard in the entrance." The miller said the devil must go out and open the house door. Then the woman was forced to give up the keys, and the peasant unlocked the cupboard. The parson ran out as fast as he could, and the miller said, "It was true. I saw the black rascal with my own eyes." The peasant, however, made off next morning by daybreak with 300 thalers. At home, the small peasant gradually launched out. He built a beautiful house, and the peasant said, "The small peasant has certainly been to the place where golden snow falls, and people carry the gold home in shovels." Then the small peasant was brought before the mayor, and bidden to say from whence his wealth had come. He answered, I sold my cow's skin in the town for $300. When the peasants heard that, they too wished to enjoy this great profit and ran home, killed all their cows, and stripped off their skins in order to sell them in the town to the greatest advantage. The mayor, however, said, But my servant must go first. When she came to the merchant in the town, he did not give her more than $2 for a skin, and when the others came, he did not give them so much, and said, What can I do with all these skins? Then the peasants were vexed that the small peasant should have thus overreached them, wanted to take vengeance on him, and accused him of his treachery before the mayor. The innocent little peasant was unanimously sentenced to death, and was to be rolled into the water in a barrel pierced full of holes. He was led forth, and a priest was brought, who was to say a mass for his soul. The others were all obliged to retire to a distance, and when the peasants looked at the priest, he recognized the man who had been with the miller's wife. He said to him, I set you free from the cupboard. Set me free from the barrel. At this same moment up came, with a flock of sheep, the very shepherd, who, as the peasant knew, had long been wishing to be mayor. So he cried with all his might, No, I will not do it. If the whole world insists on it, I will not do it. The shepherd, hearing that, came up to him and asked, What art thou about? What is it that thou wilt not do? The peasant said, They want to make me mayor if I will but put myself in the barrel, but I will not do it. The shepherd said, If nothing more than that is needed in order to be mayor, I would get into that barrel at once. The peasant said, If thou wilt get in, thou wilt be mayor. The shepherd was willing and got in. And the peasant shut the top down on him, and he took the shepherd's flock for himself and drove it away. The parson went to the crowd, and he declared that the mass had been said. Then they came and rolled the barrel towards the water. When the barrel began to roll, the shepherd cried, I am quite willing to be mayor. They believed no otherwise than that it was the peasant who was saying this, and answered, That is what we intend, but first thou shalt look about thee a little down below there. And they rolled the barrel down into the water. After that, the peasants went home, and as they were entering the village, the small peasant also came quietly in, driving a flock of sheep and looking quite contented. Then the peasants were astonished and said, Peasant, from whence comest thou? Hast thou come out of the water? Yes, truly, replied the peasant. I sank deep, deep down, until at last I got to the bottom. I pushed the bottom out of the barrel and crept out, and there were pretty meadows on which a number of lambs were feeding, and from thence I brought this flock away with me. Said the peasants, Are there any more there? Oh, yes, said he, more than I could do anything with. Then the peasants made up their minds that they too would fetch some sheep for themselves, a flock apiece. But the mayor said, I come first. So they went to the water together, and just then there were some of the small, fleecy clouds in the blue sky, which are called little lambs, and they were reflected in the water. Whereupon the peasants cried, We already see the sheep down below. The mayor pressed forward and said, I will go down first and look about me, and if things promise, well, I'll call you. So he jumped in. Splash went the water. He made a sound as if he were calling them, and the whole crowd plunged in after him as one man. Then the entire village was dead, and the small peasant, as sole heir, became a rich man. All right, now that we've heard The Little Peasant, let's break it down. This is one of those Grimm's tales that's both funny and unsettling at the same time. It's a story about a poor peasant who, through sheer trickery and deception, climbs his way to wealth and power. But unlike the classic fairy tale hero who succeeds through hard work or kindness, our little peasant wins by outsmarting and outright scamming everyone around him. And the real kicker? He gets away with it. This tale plays with some really interesting themes, and while it might seem like just an absurd little story about a con artist, there's a lot more going on under the surface. First, we have cleverness versus strength and wealth. At the start of the story, the little peasant is at a serious disadvantage. He's poor, powerless, and at the mercy of those around him. But instead of accepting his fate, he outwits everyone, turning their greed and foolishness against them. The rich villagers, the mayor, even the miller, none of them stand a chance against his quick thinking. And this isn't just about book smarts, it's about survival. The little peasant lives in a world where fairness doesn't seem to exist. The rich hold all the power, and he knows that playing by the rules won't get him anywhere. So he bends reality, creates illusions, and manipulates people to carve out his own success. This theme, intelligence triumphing over brute force, shows up in a lot of fairy tales, but the little peasant takes it to an extreme. Instead of just being clever, he's straight up deceptive, and the story seems to suggest that sometimes that's what it takes to survive. Then we have the danger of greed and blind faith. Now, while the little peasant is definitely sneaky, he wouldn't get anywhere without the sheer foolishness of the people around him. And what's their downfall? Well, it's greed. Think about it. Why do the villagers fall for his tricks? Because they want easy wealth. They don't stop to question whether a raven can actually tell the future or whether drowning themselves in a river is a logical way to get rich. They just act because they want to believe the lie. This feels really relevant today. We live in a world where misinformation spreads faster than ever. Whether it's get-rich-quick schemes, miracle cures, or the quote-unquote fake news, people often believe things because they want them to be true. The villagers in this story are the perfect example of what happens when we don't stop to question things before acting. And next, we have perception as reality. I think one of the most fascinating ideas in this story is how the little peasant doesn't just trick people, he controls the narrative. He convinces the miller that the raven is some kind of fortune teller. He gets the villagers to believe that wealth is just waiting for them at the bottom of a river. He never physically forces anyone to do anything. He just spins a good enough story and people fill in the blanks themselves. This is something we see all the time in business, politics, and media. The person who controls the story controls reality, at least for those who believe it. Advertisers do it, politicians do it, even social media influencers do it. They create a version of reality that people buy into, and that belief alone makes it powerful. And the little peasant is basically a masterclass in how to do it. Now, is there a moral? Well, most fairy tales have some kind of lesson, but the little peasant feels kind of different. Usually, trickster characters like this either get punished at the end or face some sort of consequence. But not here. The little peasant wins. So what do we take away from that? Well, on one hand, it could be a celebration of wit and intelligence, showing that if you're smart enough, you can rise above your circumstances. But on the other hand, it could be a warning about just how easy it is to manipulate people who are greedy, gullible, or desperate for a shortcut. In that way, the story still feels incredibly relevant. Whether we're looking at con artists, political spin, or viral internet hoaxes, The Little Peasant is a reminder to always question what we're told and think critically before we act. So what do you think? Is the little peasant a hero? A villain? Or just a guy making the best of a bad situation? There's definitely something satisfying about watching the rich and powerful get fooled. But at the same time, it's a little unsettling how easily people can be tricked when they want something bad enough. One thing's for sure, the story might be old, but its message still hits home today. And that wraps up this episode of Real Talk Grimm Edition. I hope you enjoyed diving into the story and its deeper meanings as much as I did. If you've liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you have thoughts on today's tale, whether you agree, disagree, or just have your own take, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media at Real Talk on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, or send an email to therealtalk@gmail.com. Let me know what you think, suggest stories you'd like to hear, or just say hi. And next time on Real Talk Grimm Edition, we're going to be breaking down the story The Golden Key. Now, if you're enjoying this show, consider leaving a rating or review. It really helps others find us and keeps our conversation going. And I want to thank you for listening. And until next time, stay curious, question the stories around you, and keep exploring the darker side of fairy tales.